Okay, we're going to start today, 31.3, the Reagan Revolution. So today we're going to talk about how the country is clearly ready for a change and they go more conservative. Okay, so especially throughout the South and Southwest, people are starting to vote for conservatives. And conservatives, if you're not sure, right, is someone who typically wants a smaller government, limited reach into business and people's lives. Okay, so they don't think the government should be putting in too many taxes. They don't like them spending their money on a lot of social programs. They kind of want them to be more hands off. Okay. And so Reagan is elected. We mentioned that last time. And I had told you he was the governor of California. And he ran on a ticket called Traditional American Values, and talked about patriotism and respect for the law and hard work and family life, which is kind of funny because he was the first president who had ever been divorced. So there you go for that. Anyway, he was married at the time. He was a former actor, so he was a very good speaker and came off very charismatic. And so he won, and he did a series of things to, make conservatives happy. He is a Republican also, so it makes sense. He wanted, first of all, there was an air traffic controller strike. This is an example. And unfortunately for the air traffic controllers, it's against the law to go on strike because air traffic is so important, right? That there could be serious, there could be deaths. So the president ordered them to go back to work, and they refused. So he fired them all, and he put the military in to oversee air traffic control while the new controllers were being trained. So that's an example of him being willing to use the power he has. And in general, though, he thought there should be less government. So he did a lot of deregulation, meaning removing rules and regulations on businesses. So he thought that, if you kind of leave them alone, the businesses will thrive more. So here's an example he did for automobile companies. He made the rules for your exhaust systems easier so that they could comply easier, and therefore he thought that would be better for those companies and they would put more money into the economy. Remember, there's a lot of economic problems in the previous presidencies. And so and that may be true, but it also hurts the efforts that they'd been putting in about reducing pollution. Okay, so you see a lot of these same things we've had recently with President Trump, right? That he believed in taking off a lot of restrictions on businesses too. And people have been very upset that the environmental things we've been working on are, being pulled back. Okay. Reagan's economic policies. So he, like I said, lowered taxes. He wants less government spending. He thinks that if people and businesses have more money in their pocket, that they will then spend it, right? And business will put it back into growing their business. And this will all help the economy. He and his supporters called it supply side economics. Critics called it Reaganomics, or sometimes they call it trickle down economics. And that's what the cartoon there shows, that, the idea supposedly is that it will be good for everyone in the long run. A lot of people don't believe this. If you're not a Republican, if you're like a Democrat, for example, you would think that this is really just helping the rich and it doesn't really trickle down and help, the poor. Also, at the same time, Reagan cut taxes. I said that also, and you can see that he had the lowest taxes ever. And He also got rid of federal programs such as helping student aid, welfare, and low-income housing. Okay. At the same time that he's getting rid of those social programs, he's also increasing his military spending, right? Because we're still worried about communism, and he thought that the way to do that is to be super prepared. And there was a military buildup under Reagan. So he is spending money on the military, but then he's cutting back money the government gets, like on taxes. So we end up having a bigger debt, federal debt, right? Because we spent more than we took in. And so our debt grows quite a large amount. I'm not going to make you know the numbers or anything, but we're talking billions, and then by the 90s, we're talking trillions, okay? So unemployment starts to rise, actually, for a while, so people were pretty critical of his ideas. Then it did start to look better, and people, this happens when, you start giving tax cuts to the rich, and businesses, making things easier on businesses. People do buy stock, and so there was some increase in the economy eventually after a short while. We'll talk about if it lasts or not in a minute, okay? All right. Also, on the conservative route and with law, he wanted to have conservative justices. He wanted a strict interpretation of the Constitution. He had, luckily during his presidency for him, he had quite a few vacancies, so he was able to do that. In 1981, he appointed the first woman, Sandra Day O'Connor. Then in 1986, the Chief Justice, Warren Burger, retired, and so he got to pick another one. He decided to move up William Rehnquist to take that Chief Justice spot, and then he picked Antonin Scalia, sorry, I'm losing it, Scalia, to fill that vacancy. And then he got another one in 1987 with Anthony Kennedy, who was also supposed to be more conservative, okay? So adding 3 conservatives during his term. Foreign policy, remember, there's still communism, and Reagan wanted to take a really tough stand on communism. In fact, he started off calling them the evil empire, and he was really, vowing that the U.S. were going to do something to stop it. Okay, that I already mentioned. That's the reason for his massive military buildup. In fact, it's the largest peacetime military buildup we've ever had in the United States. It cost about $1.5 trillion over 5 years. Reagan also asked for a strategic defense initiative. He really wanted to have some kind of protection against missiles that might be launched against the United States. It was nicknamed the Star Wars program, but the scientists were never able to really develop technology to make this work. Okay. All right. Now we're going to talk about some foreign policies. So in Latin America, I put this map here to show you. We've been talking about a lot of different times that we've been, involved in Latin America, right? And so we have another one during Reagan's time in Nicaragua. There were some rebels called the Sandinistas who overthrew the government there, and they set up a communist government. And of course, they got help from Cuba and the Soviet Union, the other major players in communism that we've been talking about. Reagan doesn't like that, and Nicaragua is relatively close to us too, right, in Latin America. So he sends aid money to help the people going against the Sandinistas, which are called the Contras. Okay, and this starts to become an issue. Congress doesn't like it, and it's getting tense, thinking that we're going to get drawn into a conflict there. Okay, another thing, and we'll get back to the Contras in a little bit. Also, around the same time, there was an issue in Grenada, and I put that on the map. You can see it's toward the right-hand side, a small island there. It is, again, rebels are uprising, and Marxist is related to communism, right? He's the founder of communism. And so, again, Reagan's very worried about what's happening. And also we have some American medical students there. So he sends U.S. troops in to rescue them and to go ahead and set up an anti-communist government. So he wants to stop, right, them from taking over and making that communist. Okay. So he also gets involved in the Middle East. We've been talking about the Middle East also. I will see if I can find you a video on this one, but basically he sent Marines in 1982 to, again, trying to stop what was happening in Lebanon. And unfortunately, the Lebanese, they don't like that the PLO guerrillas were the ones who did this. They don't like that we are getting involved. And so they start targeting us. So they target our embassy. That's the top picture there. They sent in a car bomb that killed 60 people there. Oh, I have a typo there. The Reagan sent aid to the Contras thing shouldn't be there. Sorry, I'll erase that. And then also there were a series of terrorist attacks on our military centers and the French's military centers too. And so that second one is a military barracks that got attacked, and a lot of people were killed in that attack. So it's very violent, and Reagan actually ends up deciding that he better not, get us too more involved in Lebanon, and so he has our troops pulled out. Okay, so it is election time. He wants to run for a second election in 1984. He has Bush as his running mate. The Democratic ticket is Walter Mondale, and he, if you don't know him, he was the vice president under Jimmy Carter previously. And then the first woman ever to get the nomination for a vice president, Geraldine Ferraro. Reagan ends up winning in a landslide. Look at that map. 49 out of the 50 states in the Electoral College go for Reagan. So it was a landslide vote, probably because the economy was looking up, right? So people are less unhappy than they had been previously. All right, and then the big controversy happens called the Iran-Contra deal or scandal. All right, so what happens? So American hostages get taken in Lebanon. Okay, remember where we were talking about previously about Lebanon. And we believe that the terrorists actually were related to Iran. So in Reagan's administration, they decide to make a secret deal. We'll sell you weapons to Iran in exchange for your help in getting our American hostages. Well, what happens is some of the officials decide that they wanted, remember, to give more money to the Contras. But remember how I told you that the Congress was unhappy and they made it illegal to keep giving money to the Contras in Nicaragua. Remember, we talked about them before. So what these officials do is they siphon off some of the money that's supposed to be for the weapons sales to Iran, and they decide to give some of it to the Contras, so that's illegal. So it is found out, and there's hearings, so that's what the bottom is showing the hearings. Oliver North, unfortunately, is that guy on the left. He was a major player in this scandal. And you can see a little picture on the right of Reagan testifying too. He says he didn't know that this was going on. And so they didn't find any proof that he was directly involved in the scandal, but it was still a big, huge scandal. And so it's called the Iran-Contra scandal, okay? Because it's both. It's about giving money to Iran, but then it ended up going to the Contras in Nicaragua, right? So that's why it's both, named both. Okay, and then things start turning up. In 1985, there's a new ruler in the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev. I tried to find a picture because he's very famous for his birthmark on his forehead, so I made sure I found a picture of that so you could know that. And he is quite a different ruler. He actually is open to having new ideas. So that's called glasnost. And then perestroika, which is reducing government control of the economy. So he is more open to like American ideas, right? It doesn't have to be total control. Maybe there's a little bit more of free market economy, and it's okay to let, new ideas in. So that's very different than the communism that we've seen in the past, right? So that's why things are starting to get better. So Reagan and he start working together. They make an treaty, intermediate range nuclear forces treaty, which was going to reduce the number of nuclear missiles. Remember, we had talked about how they've been building that up, and so this is really good news that, if we're getting along better with the Soviets and both sides are reducing how many nuclear weapons we have, that reduces, the threat of nuclear war. Okay.